Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the 5th round of the Superprestige Cyclocross which took place on and around the racetrack of Heusden-Zolder. With me here to discuss the racing is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Racing on the circuit of Zolder, and the race started with some surprising names at the front of the race. Aert had the fastest start with Danny van Lierop in his wheel. However, these two riders, just like Dan Soete last year, were not able to keep up with the pace of the real top guns. So as soon as Van Aert and Van der Poel had passed them, they were forming a mobile chicane for the riders behind them. Just like Dan Soete formed the safety car for the others last year, this year Tom Pidcock and the other riders were caught behind Aert and Van Lierop. Van der Poel and Van Aert opened a gap of 20 seconds super quickly and they were gone. Pidcock could never close that gap again. Following that, Van Aert and Van der Poel rode together. They worked together, they cooperated. They didn't really attack. The race didn't have the tension it had yesterday. They were constantly together, but there was no real pressure applied. In the 6th lap, Van der Poel tried an attack, but that didn't really work, so they went together into the final lap. In the 9th and final lap, Van der Poel placed an attack just after the second pit zone, and from there on he tried to put Van Aert under pressure. He took a couple of lengths, but on the steep climb, he seemed to miss a rut. He crashed, and then he didn't really block Van Aert with his bike, but Van Aert was slowed down enough so Van der Poel could get in the wheel of Van Aert immediately. It would go down to a sprint, but we never really got to see that sprint. Van Aert launched the sprint as they went on to the final straight, but Van der Poel unclipped. He missed his pedal and almost crashed, managed to stay on his bike, but Van Aert could take the victory unopposed ahead of Van der Poel. In the background, there was an interesting battle unfolding for 3rd. Sweeck looked to be in a favourable position for that, but then Lars van der Haar came back. Van Toerenhout was in it, but he was super tired after yesterday's race, so he never really featured. Pidcock looked to be in control with 2 laps to go, having a gap of 4 or 5 seconds on Van der Haar, but Pidcock eventually got caught by Van der Haar, and in the final lap couldn't beat Van der Haar anymore. Lars van der Haar ended 3rd. So, Issam, today it's Van Aert who takes the win. What's your key takeaway on the race? Do you know anything more about the form of these two riders now?
Absolutely not. I think what we know now, if it wasn't clear already, is that these two on a course like this are just at the moment a level above the rest. The way Van der Poel, together with Van Aert, opened that gap, of course, it was with the mobile chicanes in between them. But it wasn't like the others didn't see them going. They had some possibilities to pass those guys, and they were better off. Or at the moment, they thought they were better off sitting behind them. The gap was made, and then behind it was almost like most of those riders still had Haar in their legs and didn't really want to start that fast. Van der Poel had other plans. Van Aert followed very well. I think that you could say that Van der Poel was taking a little bit more initiative, especially at the beginning of the race and halfway through as well. At the end of the race, we saw Van Aert also make his move left and right a little bit, but I think that Van Aert was happy with himself sitting in the wheel of Van der Poel and waiting it out for a sprint. And yeah, then in a race like this, the margins are so small. It's very difficult to get away from another, especially if you're so worthy of each other in terms of, I think that at the moment it's very difficult to say that one is better than the other. But it was, again, a very good race. Maybe a bit too boring halfway through, but in the end we got a very, very good finish. A bit of anticlimax in a way that Van der Poel, didn't really have his sprint. But it was nevertheless a very fun race to watch again.
Yeah, the race didn't have the tension that the battle in Gavre yesterday had. Yesterday, the riders were constantly under pressure on a very difficult course, and I do very much like the course in Zolder. It's actually one of my favorites, although I preferred the course that was used for the 2016 Worlds. It's nice in its simplicity, and the fact that it doesn't get too muddy usually makes for good racing. Now, however, it didn't have the tension in terms of close combat because Van der Poel and Van Aert were evenly matched, and it was, to me at least, pretty clear that none of the two would be able to drop the other without some huge mistake. That didn't happen, and then as expected it went down to the final lap. It was still entertaining because we didn't know who would win until the very end, so it certainly wasn't a snooze fest where one rider attacks in the first lap and it's gone, but it also didn't have the same atmosphere as yesterday. I think that during the race, Van der Poel knew that he wanted to do something in the final lap, and that attack in lap 6 was kind of a test for what he wanted to do later. He placed an attack to see, okay, how much risks can I take here, what can I do here, what can I do there, and then in the final lap he really gave it his everything. And I kind of said it in the summary, but his tactic, I think, was to take 1 length here, another length here, and then 2 lengths in this downhill, and then 1 length here. And that seemed to work well, because once he hit the front, of course, he wasn't going to drop Van Aert. Van Aert is a very strong rider as well. But in the corner on the banking, he took a length on the acceleration. Then in the downhill, he took a length, took another length on the stairs, lost the length on the section right after the stairs, as Van Aert was stronger there all race. Then he had 2-3 lengths. But then he made the mistake. I think he missed the rut. But I do think that he was very nice for Van Aert there, because there would have been many riders who would have gotten their bike up there, blocked the path of Van Aert, causing Van Aert to either crash or also get off the bike. It was very, very nice of Van der Poel to not do that. And he was then relatively lucky that he did slow Van Aert down enough that Van Aert didn't fly past him on full speed. He could get on his bike and still go for the sprint, and that he then unclips is an anticlimax, but it's not really a huge mistake that he unclips. I mean, these things happen, and yeah, it's just unfortunate that we didn't get to see that sprint. I don't see point in speculating who would have won the sprint. I think it would have been close, just like all their sprints, but I don't have anything to base a prediction on for that sprint. But I think the mistake before up that climb, that's the crucial one. Without that mistake, he wins the race because he had 4 or 5 lengths already at that point, and he would have taken a couple more in that downhill towards the finish.
That was definitely a crucial point, and like you said, it was a class act from him to move his bike away, because there would be many that's at such a point they would definitely throw their bike on that path, because they know that the next rider is coming. And yeah, in the last lap, I think he would have even been excused in a way for doing so. But, he actually even moved his bike a little bit away so Van Aert could pass him. And, I think that he is such a rider to do so. And I think there are more in the field. But it's difficult to say if he would have, if he was able to sprint, if he would have beaten Van Aert. I think that Van Aert went very well at the start, and his sprint, he sprinted all the way. So it was going to be a very close sprint, I guess, and we will never know. But it will be, I think, for him a motivation now for Diegem to try and get the victory there. So yeah, plenty of motivation again for tomorrow.
I think in terms of form, it's still hard to draw a conclusion who has the upper hand. I do think they're pretty evenly matched, but the simplicity of the course in Zolder also means that it's difficult to ride away from another rider. There's no real feature where you can say, well, I'm going to get rid of another rider who is maybe 3% worse than me. I'm going to get rid of him here and he will easily crack there. The course lacks that, but I do think they're pretty evenly matched. Van der Poel will have the upper hand on the acceleration. We could see that a couple of times today. He also has the upper hand on the technique. In the downhills, he looked a lot more confident and was able to carry a bit more speed than Van Aert, and was able to take a couple of lengths there a couple of times. Van Aert was in the beginning of the race even unclipping in some downhills, whereas Van der Poel was fully sending it down. But Van Aert then again is a bit better on the longer efforts. And we could see that as well. On the initial acceleration, Van der Poel was able to draw away a little bit. And then we could see that Van Aert was able to come back on the longer efforts a little bit. So these seem pretty evenly matched. But I have noticed that in the past couple of years, a lot depends where they are on their training curve. Because these riders are so talented that they can permit to race the World Championships without being at 100% of their form. They don't need to fully peak to it as they would peak towards the Tour of Flanders or Paris-Roubaix. But with peaking to a certain level at the World, they know that they are still so much better than the full-time cross riders that they can get away with it and using it in their build-up to the road season. And that makes it even more difficult for us to say who will be better at which point in the season, because it really depends where they are on their training curve. I mean, Pidcock last year was the perfect example, doing these long training rides around the World Cup in Hoogerheide, but also in Hamme, that he did 4 hours endurance, does the race, and then 1 hour after that. It makes it more difficult for us to really pinpoint like who is in which form and what will happen, but I guess that's what we're trying to do as good as possible, and for now they seem pretty evenly matched.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's very difficult to know what they are doing around the races and the preparation as well, how much they put in terms of preparation, and and what the plan exactly is, because maybe for Van Aert or for Van der Poel the peak is not to be in for the World Championships, but later into the season, or it's very difficult to know what they are doing at the moment. But we have to enjoy it. They are equally matched at the moment. They deliver in terms of a battle that we were hoping for. So yeah, let's just hope that next coming races are going to be a battle as we have today in Heusden-Zolder. I think that it can deliver then a very, very great race to watch. And to be honest, behind it was also not the most boring race. At a certain point, I think Sweeck was definitely looking good there, and then had some difficulties, but that was also due to his back that played up again.
Yeah, it's not something that he has experienced all too often, unlike Iserbyt, but in the interview he did indeed mention that it played up yesterday, and that played up in the second part today, which caused him to lose a couple of positions, which was pretty interesting. I do also think that there was an interesting battle there for the overall classification. Sweeck at some point had distanced Van der Haar. Well, that was mainly due to a mistake of Hermans, but Van der Haar was distant, so Sweeck needed to put in a lot of effort. Van Toerenhout was dying in the wheels. Pidcock didn't seem too eager to do all too much at that point. Sweeck worked hard and paid the price for that, and had his back playing up again. Van der Haar, on the other hand, did the opposite. After that mistake, he really settled into a race, and I think it's maybe a bit that something that we see, like Van der Haar is a bit older, compared to some other riders. He's not that much older than Sweeck, to be honest, just 2 years, but the race of yesterday is clearly still in the legs of many people, and the tiredness, they will have felt that in the beginning of the race, and you need to poke through that tiredness and then eventually get the going. And for Van der Haar, that seemed the case. He seemed a bit tired in the first part of the race, didn't look all too great, poked through that tiredness, and then eventually got the going, and even beat Pidcock, because Pidcock seemed to be the winner out of that battle. Van der Haar needed to work in the chase, Sweeck needed to work to get back, and then Pidcock attacked, seemed in control for third place, but eventually paid the toll, and also got caught by Van der Haar, and even wasn't able to beat Van der Haar in that final lap anymore. I think it wasn't a great day for Pidcock. He said he didn't want to end third again, but I don't think that he meant ending fourth by that.
Maybe he did. No, but I mean, he was definitely in the beginning of the race a bit struggling. Later on came into the race a little bit, but I think that Van der Haar as well was also coming back in a race which suits him as well. And for Pidcock, a course like this is not really the best course that you can give him. So for Van der Haar, it was he was, I think, very motivated to finish well yesterday on a course that you could arguably say is not really his course. He also did quite well, so the form is definitely there, and today he showed it. And I think that Pidcock is also in a very good shape, but just on a course like this, and probably with the legs of Gavere, struggled a little bit, but nevertheless, I think for him also a good result. And when we are going to have races that suits him a little bit more, I think that then we will see Pidcock more to the front.
Yeah, the only question is, when are we going to get courses that really suit him? I mean, today definitely didn't. Yesterday did. He was good. The form is there. But today, with the long start section, we know Pidcock isn't the best starter in the world. On the other hand, he can get good starts. We saw it yesterday in Gavre. We've seen it at other occasions as well when he did get the good start. But it just needs to go right. I think he doesn't have the pure explosiveness, like the 1-2 second blast from the line. His reaction time does not seem to be the greatest, and I don't know if that's just natural or maybe a lack of focus compared to the rest, because I can see that the other riders are already putting their legs down when Pidcock is still standing before he gets the going. Try to focus on that a couple of times. So that's my takeaway on the start. So today was tough because the start straight was long, and if you have a bad getaway, you'll be passed on many sides. I therefore think that tomorrow, if he doesn't get a good start, will be even harder for him, because in Diegem, after the start, you quickly come onto this long off camber. You'll be running, and then it's race over right away for you there. Baal, he should be able to get the win there normally. What other races is he doing? He's doing Loenhout. Don't think that that's a good race for him. Herentals might be a good one for him with a big climb. But then again, it's now in the first part of the lap. It's getting the side on the flat. Don't think he has the raw watts to compete with Van Aert or Van der Poel yet. So might be difficult this Christmas period. I think his best opportunity was yesterday in Gavre, but he's definitely not in a bad form. And to be honest, he didn't seem all too bothered that he didn't end on the podium in the post-race interview. Then let's take a look at the entire top 10. Van Aert with the win ahead of Van der Poel and Van der Haar. Pidcock ended in 4th ahead of Van Toerenhout, who gave it his everything but eventually fell short. Nieuwenhuis finally getting a good result again after some difficult races. 6th, of course, a course that he likes. He ended on the podium of a World Cup here before. Hermans, bit of a reality check compared to Mol, ending 7th ahead of Sweeck, who we already discussed. Bad day for his classification. Kevin Kuhn ended 9th with Van der Putte in 10th. I don't really think that there is anybody in the top 10 that we need to discuss unless you want to, but else I would like to ask your opinion on Iserbyt. He ended 11th. He skipped yesterday due to the injury. What's the matter with him? Was it his back? Was it his knee? What's the matter with him?
Great question. What is the matter with him? It's hard to say, but it's definitely not. He's not on 100%. It's he's struggling. Heusden-Zolder is definitely not a race that allows you, especially with Van der Poel and Van Aert opening that race so fast. It's definitely not a race that you can come into and actually get a rhythm. So it's a very, very difficult course to get back going again. But I think he was struggling in one way or the other and didn't really have the legs to compete with the guys he normally should be competing with. So then the question can be asked if he's 100%. Did he have any issues during the race, and what is next for him now? Because if the next coming races are going to be like this, there is probably not a point of starting. So he should maybe look into that and see what's best for him now.
Yeah, he said that everything he still gets this season is a bonus, and that of course has to do with the lingering back/knee injury that he still has from when he did mountain biking, and he now also has that knee injury from Val di Sole. Things aren't looking good for him, and I wonder at what point he will draw his conclusions that this is maybe a lost season, because now it seems more hoping than actually thinking that he can still do anything. He obviously had some sort of injury because he didn't just forfeit for Gavre without any good reason. But at the same time, let's be honest, it's just not it for him. He starts and then he's just hoping, but he doesn't really believe that he can achieve anything. He starts and against his common knowledge, he hopes that he can pull off a miracle and keep his good place in the classification, and he will do the same with the X2O trophy, and he will do the same with the Belgian championships and the same with the world championships. But perhaps it's just better to accept the fact that this is a lost season, and that he should give his body rest and start recovering and working on a stronger next season, because there's still many years left in him to be a top tier cyclocross rider. I would like to end with 2 honorable mentions. First of all, Aaron Dox, 18th place, first year under 23. Good race by him. And then second of all, I would like to mention Clément Venturini. We saw him a bit in the early phases of the race. Got a bit ahead of himself there, racing at the front after a very rapid start. then paid the price for that and fell through the field, 19th. Still interesting to see him back racing here. And yeah, it's not bad 19th, but a rider who ends 5th at the World Championships last year can definitely do better. I'm interested to see where the season will bring him, because I do think that he can hope and work towards another top 10 at the World Championships this year. Then let's go and talk about the women's race. Alvarado had the best start and she caused a leading group of 4 riders in the first lap. Besides her, Inge van der Heijden, Sylvia Persico and Denise Betsema were there. Brand, after a somewhat bad start, was just a couple of seconds behind with Worst, Ribeiro and Van Alphen in her wheel. Eventually, these groups merged and we had a relatively big leading group. Alvarado was caught up behind the crash of Van der Heijden and needed to chase. This meant that Betsema was leading the race together with Van der Heijden. Alvarado managed to close that gap, and from there on it was a bit of a cat and mouse game. Would Brand and Persico be able to come back or not? It was a bit of yo-yoing, and eventually Persico closed the gap after Brand had done most of the work, and Brand managed to come back despite the hard pace of Betsema. Again, Inge van der Heijden was making mistakes all on the same climb towards the end of the lap, but it was actually not van der Heijden who suffered from this, because there was only one rod that was rideable. The other riders were held up whilst she was able to continue. This led to her going into the halfway point of the race together with Alvarado at the front of the race. It was looking to go into a final lap battle between Inge van der Heijden and Sein del Carmen Alvarado, but towards the end of the penultimate lap, Alvarado placed an attack which van der Heijden was unable to respond to. Alvarado went on to take victory, and not only that, after a bad day in Poel, she is now almost back in the Superprestige. She is only 1 point down, because Inge van der Heijden ended 2nd, and behind Brand beat Persico for 3rd. Betsema, despite doing a lot of hard work and looking pretty strong, only managed to end 5th, which means that she now only has a 1 point lead in the Telenet Superprestige. So Alvarado with the win. I think we can conclude that the freshness she had from yesterday's race definitely helped her, because she looked fresh and alive today.
Yeah, indeed. I think that utilized also that freshness very well. I think that she went on the right moment, had that gap. Van der Heijden was with her then, and from there on, I think that Alvarado knew what she had to do. Van der Heijden was able to take some pulls, and then at a certain point you need to make a decision. Am I going to bank it all in for a sprint, or am I just going to try and race as fast as I can and maybe even go for a last lap where I have to do it all alone? And she went for that second option, and you only do that when you you feel confident and when you know that you're able to do something like that. And today Alvarado was, in my opinion, the better woman. Van der Heijden was definitely doing her best to try and follow, but it was just not enough today to follow Alvarado, and Brand was probably still feeling the legs of Gavere, and was constantly in a chase and had some difficulties in the race to get into it, but then finishes a very, very strong 3rd place.
Yeah, I think you say that very well. Alvarado looked fresh, and she raced with that freshness, knew when she had to take control. And in the beginning of the race, she was in the back of the group, and she knew that you come to pinpoints on the course where you're going to be struggling. And Alvarado then initiated to herself, okay, I need to take the lead now. She told herself that she needed to do that and did so. So she took the lead, stayed away from the trouble. Van der Heijden kept struggling up the hill, causing traffic jams, and Van der Heijden was the only one that actually benefited from that, as twice she was able to stay at the front when Persico and Brand needed to waste energy. I do think Alvarado absolutely deserved the win. She was tactically perfect, well, almost perfect. But Brand was strong again today, but I think she never really recovered from what was a quite bad start. She needed to move up, and because she was at the back of the leading group, every time that somebody made a mistake, she needed to put effort in. And I think the same goes for Persico. Persico was again strong today, but again, it wasn't a flawless race. Last time it was how she divided effort. This time it were her tactics, and I'll come back on that in a little bit. But it's still nice to see Brand up here Her starts this year have been a bit of a thing that they aren't as good as they could be, but it's also not the end of the world, and I think overall the conclusion of yesterday stands. She is still better than before she went on the Trek Segafredo training camp.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a strong race from her, and she had to. There were some difficult moments where she had to chase back, and I was at a certain point I was thinking that the podium was not going to be possible, but then came into the race again, and I think that she even thought that Van der Heijden maybe was a possibility, but that was just a bit too far for her, and but in the end a very strong ride and 2 in a row, so it confirms basically that she's in a very good shape, and that the next coming races we're going to see a Lucinda Brandt that is going to be able to fight for more podiums and maybe even a victory.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how she will go against the others, and the signs are promising, because yesterday she was good, today she was good, and the beginning of the season she was up there with Van Empel. Van Anrooij looks to have made a step. I wonder how Van Empel will come back, and I think tomorrow will be a very interesting race in Diegem, because then Pieters is also racing on a course that is completely different to Gavere. I'm interested to see how they can go, and now I can also put Persico in there, because as said, she was once again very strong today. I do believe that Persico has a shot at the world title or a podium at the very least, but she will either need to improve her tactics, because today again it was not amazing. Her positioning was off. She should have been more towards the front of that group. Her riding style, I think, can cost her in the future, because I don't think it's wise to ignore the signs of Brandt when she asks to take a turn when you're chasing. When you're doing it with Betsema, it's still not the nicest thing to do, but on the other hand, in that situation, you can benefit from the excuse that Betsema is racing for a GC, and it's her task to get back to Alvarado and Van der Heijden. But yeah, it's things that Persico needs to improve, or else she needs to hope for a lot of luck at the World Championships.
Yeah, and the main question is also going to be, will the focus slowly but surely, with the move already to ride for UAE next year, the move, the focus will probably be more and more on the road. And then it's the question, will a cyclocross campaign fit in it, and how serious will that be taken, and how, what are the goals going to be? But, Persico at itself at the moment is definitely a talent. A raw diamond in a way. There are definitely some points where she can work on, technically as well. And if she can work on that, and if she has the ability to, or the time to actually work on those aspects, definitely think that she could be one of the better, women in the field, especially on a course like this. And today as well, it was proven that she was very, very good, but maybe a bit, compensating just too much with the corners, working maybe a bit too much, and then it's difficult to finish it off. But I think that she today definitely deserved a podium, but it was just not meant to be today.
I already mentioned her, Betsema. I think Betsema looked pretty good today. Also was unfortunate to end behind one of those mistakes of Van der Heijden. But then again, also Betsema in the second half of the race paid the toll for racing so hard in the first part of the race. It was the classic Betsema tactic of racing hard, and at some point it looked relatively promising, because she had gotten rid of many other riders, and if she would end third and Alvarado would win, or if she would end second with Alvarado winning, it would be good for classification. But Betsema after the race didn't seem all too happy about how the race had unfolded, and I think that also has to do with the fact that she now only has a 1 point lead in the overall when she had a 5 point lead before. So it was a bit unfortunate for her, but again, the tactic of riding all the time is not necessarily the smartest, especially when she was in the chase. I would think like, okay, I understand that you have a classification to race for, but I'm sure Persico will also take a turn, because Persico is, especially on the road, a rider that you would want to let do a turn for you. And then in the final lap, she goes into the final lap with a group of 3, Brandt, Persico, and Betsema. And then she ends third of that group, which is again very much Betsema, who in the final lap often lacks an extra gear, which Brandt and Persico are able to find to get their lap times down again. whilst Betsema is only able to keep them consistent, which is a bit of a shame because I think a 5th place doesn't really credit her enough for the strength that she had today on, let's be honest, a course that is not a typical Betsema course.
Today it was definitely some moments that I was thinking, why take the initiative in this race, especially if you are the one that has to defend the gap. The focus should be on one woman, but yeah, I think maybe Betsema was having some scenarios that if it was going to be a large group going to the finish and then in a sprint, it would be maybe a difficult task with Alvarado having a very good sprint in a way. Yeah, maybe that was the reason why she did it. Maybe she felt so good that she wanted to break away from the others, but in the end she left with nothing. She brought back some the Superprestige right now is a bit more exciting, the classification, and Alvarado is in a very good position right now, because I think that the courses that are coming up should suit Alvarado a little bit better with the form that she is in right now, the freshness that she has. Normally that should be an in the end a total victory for Alvarado in terms of the Superprestige, but it's cyclocross, everything can happen, so there is still some chances for Betsema, but today definitely was a bad day for Betsema in terms of the classification.
She gave away what was a very solid lead, but it's still not over for her. I mean, I do agree that there are some courses that are coming up that should suit Alvarado a bit more, tomorrow in Diegem, but Gullegem and Middelkerke, especially Middelkerke, those are courses that Betsema can do pretty well on. So I think it's going to be interesting. Betsema today maybe was a bit... No, I don't think she was unlucky. I think she made some mistakes, but then again, it's also in the heat of the moment and you need to see how things eventually play out, because at some point when Persico and Brand were dropped, if Brand doesn't put in that big effort, Persico doesn't close the gap first and Brand doesn't come back either, which would have led to a completely different race. Sometimes you need a bit of luck, and I think the coin just didn't fall her way today, so she just was on the wrong end today, and then 5th place is still not terrible. I think the form is clearly there, so I'm curious to see how she will go, and again, as I said, the level is becoming higher and higher, and it looks to be crawling a bit closer together. Let's look at the entire top 10 then, because there's still some other names we need to mention. Alvarado with the win ahead of Van der Heijden and Brand. Persico in 4th ahead of Betsema and Van Alphen. 7th place to Annemarie Worst, who is still struggling with her knee. 8th place for Marion Norbert-Ribeiro. 9th place for Ferrand-Prévot ahead of Laura Molengraaf. I think it's pretty obvious who I want to talk about. Pauline Ferrand-Prévot yesterday had a shocker of a race. I thought it was actually her first top 10 of the season, but that was not the case. It is, however, her best performance of the season, because the start field today was pretty stacked. 9th on a course which, to be honest, I don't really associate her with, since she should be better on the climbing, is a good result. So is it fair to conclude that maybe the running is something that she struggles with a lot? Because from what I saw in Antwerp, running is really not her thing.
That's definitely fair to conclude, but I think that also there is some improvement, but I don't think it's the improvement that many of us were thinking or expecting. The running is definitely something that is an issue that is quite visible. But it's also, I think that the level at the moment for Prévot is not on the level that you could say that she could battle for a top 5 at the moment. So the improvements are there. It's getting better and better. She's getting a bit more comfortable, and there is still some races to go, so there is still room for improvement and still some time. So it's but it will be a race against the time, to be honest, to be in some sort of a level that she can battle in for top 5 on the World Championships. But you never know, we will see, and it's interesting to see the improvements, and hopefully we can see more improvements in the next coming races.
I then immediately also want to mention the rider right behind Prévot, Laura Molengraaf. She is only a junior. To end 10th in such a stacked cross is then also impressive, and I have a couple of other riders that I still want to point out. Kristina Zemanova, the Czech champion, she ends 11th. Last year, she already ended, I think it was 13th then in this race. It's clearly a course that suits her, and an 11th place is a step forward. That's definitely another rider that looks promising. I think she is already the best best rider of Czech Republic. She will stay that for the coming years, despite that there is a relatively talented generation following behind her. I don't think that she will become a rider that will feature in the top 10 week in, week out, but it's definitely a rider that is able to do that from time to time in a couple of years. And then for the rest, I just want to bash the organizers of the cross in Heusden-Zolder for not organizing a junior women's race. To me, it's just insane that there's 36 junior women needing to race here against the elites. Many of these riders have traveled to Belgium to gain experience, and it's just not helping their development to race here and race against the 80% limit. They need to race for wins, and it's not that there's no time or no money to organize other races. They organize a first year under 17, a second year under 17, and an under 19 races, all for men. It's just not helping it. And then it's always the questions that Belgians ask, why don't we produce female talent? It's because there's just a lack of races. And yes, there has been an improvement in terms of number of junior women's races. I give credit to Overijse, Antwerp, for instance. They added junior women races, but there's still a long way to go, because this Christmas period, Gavere, then today in Zolder, Diegem, Loenhout, Kokzijde, all these races don't have junior women races, and it's just not good. It needs to change. Well, my rant is over. I don't think it will change anything, but nothing will change tomorrow either, because we will be back tomorrow evening, late podcast. We will be discussing the Superprestige in Diegem. Issam, thank you for being here. Do you dare to make a prediction who wins the men's and women's race tomorrow in Diegem?
Yeah, I dare. I think for the men's, it would be Van der Poel. I think that he's motivated after today. He is a man on a mission, probably like he was in Gavere, and then it's going to be very difficult to beat somebody that already won so many times there. So I think Van der Poel will take it there. Women's side, I think that it wouldn't be... Alvarado would definitely be good, so I would say Alvarado for the win there in Diegem.
I will agree with you on Van der Poel, but I will say Puk Pieterse takes the win in the women's race. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for being here today, Issam.
Thanks for having me.
And as said, we will be back tomorrow to discuss the racing in Diegem. Thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.